So Brian, you mentioned the gap. I assume you're referring to the survival gap, and if so, is that in relation to the chain of survival? Can you talk us through that?
Yeah, so the chain of survival is this concept that all these links must go into place for someone to survive. And before the paramedics get there, there's three links that have to come first. The first is to recognize a cardiac arrest. So we've really tried to make it more simple for people to recognize a cardiac arrest. They just have to look that someone's unconscious, unresponsive, and not breathing normally. We're not asking bystanders now to check for a pulse because people get confused and they don't know how to do that, and they can't take a pulse properly. So if people are unconscious and not breathing properly, we want them to call 000. The reason they've got to call 000 is as soon as they call the operator, people can be dispatched. The paramedics can be dispatched. Good sound responders can be dispatched. The 000 call taker will also help you do bystander CPR or hands-only CPR. So this is where you're pushing hard and fast on the chest to the rhythm of Baby Shark. This doesn't fix the cardiac arrest, but what it does do, it circulates enough blood and oxygen to the brain and to the cardiac muscle, the heart muscle, to keep it viable till the paramedics get there, or better still, till a public access defibrillator gets there. What the heart needs is defibrillation. I think the best analogy I've heard of a heart attack and what defibrillation does is if you've got a really nice car and the engine's running smoothly, that's your heart working normally. If the car stops for whatever reason, the electrical system goes wrong, and you try to start it and you keep the starter motor engaged, the battery is running down and eventually the battery will run out of power. That's the same as your heart having electrical activity and it's running out of electrical activity. The defibrillator needs to happen while the heart still has energy. And what the defibrillator does, it's very similar to just turning the key off and starting the starter engine again. So it's stopping the whole motor and it's letting it reset and start again. And that's why we need early defibrillation. For every minute that goes by, there's a 10% less chance of the heart restarting again with defibrillation. So if we can get defibrillators to people who collapse within the first 3 to 4 to 5 minutes, with bystander CPR going on, they're going to have a much higher survival rate than if we just do CPR alone and wait for the paramedics to turn up in 10 minutes.
That really does highlight the importance of bystander intervention, doesn't it, Brian? And I know you focused heavily on the relationship between early bystander intervention and out-of-hospital cardiac arrest survival. Can you tell us what you've actually discovered?
Yeah, so I'm lucky that my research links in with VACAR, which is the Victorian Ambulance Cardiac Arrest Registry from Ambulance Victoria. So I have a lot of access to their data and to their researchers. So one of the studies we published was looking at the rate of bystander CPR in Australia and the barriers associated with it. And a lot of it links in with disadvantaged areas. So the more disadvantaged the area is, the less likely is there's bystander CPR. So one of the things we certainly have to do is try and increase the training that a lot of these areas, especially disadvantaged areas, are getting in providing free bystander CPR. A lot of training it was very focused on being perfect and getting 100% score at the end of your 4-hour training session. Where now we're more focused on doing quick training sessions and maybe an hour long, 40 minutes long, where we're showing people that bystander CPR and using an AED is not rocket science. Anyone can do it. And if you start doing it, stepping forward and doing CPR for someone who's collapsed, and you're not very good at it, someone better will tap you on the shoulder and say, I can help. Where if no one helps, if everyone just stands back in a big circle, no one wants to step forward and help. So it's really important that everyone feels empowered and confident to step forward, start hands-only CPR, and look for that public access defibrillator.
One of your papers, recently published in Resuscitation, drew a correlation between the ability and the willingness of bystanders to immediately give someone CPR and defibrillation in the event of an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest and their chances of survival. How was this a revelation for people dedicated to solving the survival gap?
Well, what we found is we did a study where we looked at just about 4,500 out-of-hospital cardiac arrests. We looked at who was providing the CPR and what was their medical training. So we found out that 54% of the people were related to the patient, and another 11% were friends or family. So one of the things we often hear is people are reluctant to do CPR on a stranger. But if you learn CPR and have to use it, you have a 65% chance of actually doing it on someone you either are related to or you're friends with. There was only 36% were doing CPR on a stranger. But what we found was there was no difference between being related to the patient or being a stranger to the patient. So there was no difference if you're related or not to survival. We also looked at whether the person was a lay person or whether they're a medical professional. So 83% of them were lay people and 17% were professionals. And we did find that for medical professionals, there was a 40% increase in chance of survival for all out of hospital cardiac arrest and a 73% increase in survival for VTAC or VFib or shockable cardiac arrests. And we had to delve into that a bit deeper because we thought, okay, maybe they're doing better CPR, maybe they're running a better cardiac arrest because they're medical professionals. But when we added in public access defibrillation, that totally attenuated the results. There was no difference between lay people and medical professionals. So what it looks like is that the medical professionals were looking for public access defibrillation and were trying to put the defibs on quicker. And that seemed to be the difference between the two groups, which really highlights that CPR is really important to keep everything going, to keep that battery turning over so you can actually get the defibrillator to turn off the key and restart the engine. But it's the defibrillation is the key for out-of-hospital cardiac arrests.
So would you say then a level of education is required for lay people around defibrillation and the importance of getting the defib on the patient as soon as possible?
Yeah, so a lot of people are nervous about defibrillation, and I think the television and film industry have a lot to do with it. They see people jumping a foot off the bench and people are scared that they're going to get shocked. Where defibrillation is really turn on the machine and follow the instructions. And all the AEDs, all the automatic external defibrillators are so sophisticated, they will only shock rhythms that people need to be shocked. They won't, if someone's just fainted and you put a defib on, it won't shock them. But it could save their life if they are in a cardiac arrest. And literally all you have to do is turn it on, put the pads in the right place. And when you're putting the pads on, we're trying to position them so the heart's between the pads. And what the defibrillator does, it sends a jolt of electricity through the heart one way, and then immediately another jolt through the heart the other way, and it stops all electrical activity. And what we're hoping for is the pacemaker will start that rhythm, that the electrical rhythm that the heart needs to have to pump. Sometimes it doesn't work on the first go, and that could be that the heart has lack of oxygen or it needs more blood. And then the defibrillator will tell you to do 2-minute CPR. So you push hard and fast in the chest to the rhythm of Baby Shark. And then the defibrillator will come in and say, stop touching the patient. It will analyze and it will tell you whether to shock or not the patient. And we can keep going for this for up to 30 minutes. Patients have survived with bystander CPR for up to 40 minutes. I think there was one case in America where it was 60-minute response for the ambulance. There was no defibrillator in the town. And the townspeople lined up. There was a line of them ready to take over CPR because CPR is tiring. And after 2 minutes, you need to swap over. So they swapped over. And after 60 minutes, the ambulance got there. They were still in a shockable rhythm because the CPR had kept the oxygen going to the heart and kept the brain alive. And they were shocked back. So CPR is really important, but it really is early defibrillation. The earlier we get the defib there, the better.
What a heartwarming story, and how truly inspiring seeing a community come together to save a Fantastic. Your most recent paper published in Pre-Hospital Emergency Care compared out-of-hospital cardiac arrest occurring in schools and universities and other public locations over the last 20 years in Victoria. What were your main findings and recommendations from this research, Brian?
All right, so our hypothesis was that a school is a closed community, so they should be able to organize themselves to provide bystander CPR, to have AEDs available and to use them if someone has a sudden cardiac arrest. So when we looked at the cases, we looked at about 9,000 out-of-hospital cardiac arrests in Victoria. There was only 131 in schools and 8,900 in public buildings. So the rate in schools is very low, But when it does happen in schools, 25% of them were students, so under 18 or around 18 years old. 25% were the staff, so the faculty of the school or university. And then a few of them were grandparents or parents collecting kids from school. But the majority were people using the sporting facilities outside of school hours. So when we looked and we compared the arrests in schools compared to public locations, there was no difference in survival, which is what we were hoping to find, because we felt that the school community should be able to organize themselves to get earlier defibrillation there. We did find that for the last 3 years of the study, there was 100% CPR for cardiac arrest in schools. So everyone got CPR, but only 47% got public access defibrillation. So there was 30 students or 30 cardiac arrests in a shockable rhythm, and only 19 of them got a defib. So there's a gap there that needs to be filled. So a few of the problems are, one, quite often the school AED is locked up in the office, and a large school may just have one AED and possibly not well signposted. So we really want to encourage schools to do a cardiac emergency response plan, where they actually have to plan what happens if a cardiac arrest happens here, how long does it take to get an AED, and if it takes more than 5 minutes, so 2.5 minutes there and 2.5 minutes back, they need more defibs on that school. We also want them to have response teams. So like schools practice for fire alarms, they should practice for a cardiac arrest so they know who's going to respond to it. All the students and staff should be taught CPR so they can all recognize it, and they can all step in for that first minute or two until the response team arrive. And finally, because so many of the cardiac arrests happen outside school hours, we need to get the AEDs from behind the desk and put them on outside cabinets that are available 24 hours a day. And that means that the AED isn't just available from 9 to 5, but it's available 24 hours a day for the whole community. It becomes a community resource. And all it takes is you have to have it available in that 5 minutes. If it takes 10 minutes to get to the AED, it's too late. So